Most people imagine 19th century cities as places of invention, industry, and rising progress. Yet if you had stepped into Glasgow in 1848 and walked into its narrow wynds at the wrong hour, the first thing you would have noticed was not progress, but the smell. A dense, sour heaviness that clung to the throat and made breathing feel like work. And what is rarely said aloud is that in these streets, death did not arrive dramatically, but seeped slowly through walls, floors, water buckets, and lungs until entire households were emptied without a sound. The myth is that disease in the past struck suddenly like lightning, yet the truth inside these lanes was quieter and more relentless, because cholera did not need spectacle to destroy lives. It needed only crowding, damp air, shared water, and time. The wynds were narrow passages pressed tightly between tall tenements, whose stone faces trapped moisture and shadow so thoroughly that sunlight rarely reached the ground, and when it did, it revealed surfaces layered with grime that had settled over years rather than days. Residents moved through these corridors with practiced awareness, stepping around puddles that never fully dried and carrying pails whose contents sloshed softly, each step careful not from politeness but from experience, because one misstep could mean slipping into filth that soaked through clothing and lingered against the skin for hours. This was not neglect in the way outsiders imagined it. It was compression. Bodies and lives folded inward because space was scarce and survival demanded proximity. Inside a single building, families occupied rooms stacked above one another like compartments, each space holding more people than it was meant to contain, and the air inside never truly refreshed because windows were small, doors remained closed against cold, and fires burned low to conserve fuel. You might have expected noise to dominate such crowded living, yet often the dominant sensation was pressure, the awareness of breathing air already warmed by someone else's lungs, already carrying traces of cooking smoke, damp cloth, and unwashed stone. This was how strength began here, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet ability to endure conditions that did not improve and were never meant to. As morning settled over the wynds, daily movement began not with energy, but with continuation, because the body waking in such a place did not feel restored, it felt resumed, as if sleep had only paused the strain rather than erased it. People rose from bedding laid close to the floor where warmth lingered longest, their joints stiff from dampness that seeped through walls during the night, and before the first task was even begun, the skin already felt cool and slightly wet, a sensation that never fully disappeared indoors. The smell of stored water drifted from buckets kept in corners, a faint metallic odor mixed with something stagnant, and though it was unpleasant, it was familiar, accepted in the same way one accepts the weight of clothing or the pressure of shoes. Water was necessary, and necessity often ignored comfort. Outside, the wynds slowly filled with motion as doors opened and shut, footsteps echoing softly against stone, and voices rose briefly before being swallowed by the narrowness of the passage. Work called people outward, yet the street did not release them easily, because the path itself demanded attention, forcing bodies to move single file where space tightened, and shoulders to turn sideways when two travelers met. Nothing here encouraged ease. Everything required adjustment. Even carrying a bundle or basket meant calculating each step, because brushing against a wall might smear damp grit across cloth, and contact with another person meant sharing not only space, but whatever clung to them. Disease thrived in such closeness, not because people were careless, but because the environment removed the possibility of distance. You could not step away from the air, you could not refuse the water, you could not widen the street. Conditions shaped the outcome long before symptoms appeared, and by the time illness was noticed, the chain that spread it had already formed. As the day progressed, the pressure deepened in ways that were easy to overlook but impossible to escape, because life inside the wynds required constant negotiation with the environment, and that negotiation quietly drained strength. Clothing rarely dried completely, leaving fabric cool against the skin even near the fire, and boots tracked moisture indoors that settled into floorboards and returned later as a chill that climbed upward through the soles of the feet. Food was simple and often eaten quickly, not as a pleasure but as a necessity fitted between tasks, and its warmth faded fast in rooms where drafts slipped through cracks too small to see but large enough to feel. Children moved through these spaces with a kind of learned caution, stepping around containers, tools, and sleeping forms, their awareness shaped not by instruction but by repetition. They understood where to stand and where not to, which corners stayed driest, which spots near the wall felt coldest, and this knowledge became part of them as naturally as speech. Outside, the street carried its own signals of strain, because the smell changed as the hours passed, thickening as waste accumulated, and thinning briefly when a breeze pushed through, only to return once the air stilled again. These shifts were subtle, yet they mattered, because they revealed how little separated comfort from discomfort, and how quickly conditions could tilt toward danger. Cholera did not announce itself with a sound or a sign. It moved silently through shared resources, attaching itself to the very things people relied on to live. The body might feel normal at midday and weakened by evening, not from visible injury, but from something unseen already working inside it. This was the quiet cruelty of the wynds, that harm often began before anyone realized it had started, and by the time it was understood, it had already spread beyond a single room or family. When illness finally showed itself, it rarely did so alone, because in a place where walls were thin and water was shared, separation was almost impossible to achieve. A cough in one room could be heard in the next, and though it might be dismissed at first, the sound lingered in memory, returning later when another voice repeated it. The body weakened gradually, losing strength not in a dramatic collapse, but in small withdrawals, a slower step, a longer pause before standing, a hand resting against a wall for balance. No single sign demanded alarm, yet together they formed a pattern that those who lived there recognized with quiet unease. There were few remedies available, and fewer still that worked reliably, so most endured their symptoms in place, lying where they slept, breathing the same air as those around them, hoping the body would recover on its own. Sometimes it did, often it did not. When a life ended, the change it left behind was practical rather than ceremonial, because space had to be cleared, bedding had to be reused, and routines had to continue. The system did not stop, the street did not pause. Work still needed doing, water still needed carrying, and others still needed the room. This was not cruelty in intention, it was necessity in motion, a structure that allowed no interruption because interruption risked survival for everyone. In such conditions, endurance became the only form of strength that mattered, the ability to continue moving within an environment that did not soften, did not widen, and did not adjust to human limits. By the time evening returned and the light faded from the narrow passage, the wynds did not grow peaceful so much as quieter, and in that quiet the weight of the day became more noticeable, settling into shoulders, backs, and lungs that had worked without rest. People returned indoors carrying the street with them, its dampness on their boots, its smell in their clothing, its residue on their hands, and as doors closed, the air inside thickened again with shared breath and stored moisture. Rest came slowly in such rooms, not because bodies refused it, but because the environment never fully released its grip, and even in sleep, the senses remained half aware of sounds from nearby walls or footsteps outside. This was how life continued in the cholera wynds of Glasgow, not through triumph or relief, but through repetition, each day pressing slightly harder than the last, while the structure surrounding it remained unchanged. The city beyond these lanes might have spoken of progress, industry, and expansion, yet within the wynds, progress meant something quieter, the simple fact of waking again and rising once more into the same narrow air. And once you understand that truth, the image of 19th century urban life shifts, because what sustained these streets was not innovation or ambition, but endurance measured breath by breath inside spaces that never loosened their hold.